Digifest is done and the verdict is in. It looks like side decks are out and Mulligan is here to stay. Let's talk about how we can change our deck building and our established thought patterns on how to do your ratios in your deck in order to take advantage of this new rule that we're going to be implementing moving forward. First, let's start by talking about what the established ratios for a Digimon deck are. Typically, people will be running anywhere from 12 to 14 level 3s, 10 to 12 level 4s, 7 to 9 level 5s, and 6 to 8 level 6s. This is considered the standard ratio of what makes a well-constructed Digimon deck that is going to be able to go out on curve every turn and hit that next milestone in order to very smoothly go into your level 6 power spike, which is where most Digimon boss monsters lie. However, with this new Mulligan rule and the way that it works in Digimon specifically, where you take your opening hand and if you don't like it, you put those 5 cards to the bottom of your deck and then you draw a new 5 cards. What this essentially means is that you are digging 10 cards deep into your deck, which can significantly alter the way that you can construct your deck in order to guarantee or at least have a very high probability of hitting a level 3 in your opening hand in order to help you prevent from bricking. So what exactly constitutes a brick hand in Digimon TCG? Well, for the most part, people tend to agree that a brick hand is a hand that does not contain a level 3 in it in order for you to get your free draw off of your hatching area. However, I think I want to expand on that definition a little bit because Digimon is a game where you don't necessarily have to be on curve in order to play your cards. You can just play a card as long as you have enough memory to do so. So when you're the turn player opening up the game for turn 1, you have 10 memory to work with. So technically speaking, as long as you have a card that costs 10 memory or less, then you have the ability to play out a card. So why do we still constitute that as a brick hand? Well, I think Digimon is a game, and this is something that I've talked about on this channel before, that is very balanced around having 3 memory. So typically, handing your opponent any more than 3 memory is considered bad, or at least it feels bad to do so. About 4 memory is like the maximum that you want to be passing over to your opponent on any given turn. So when we have a hand where we're forced to hard slam a level 4 Digimon that costs, let's say, play costs 5 or 6, or even like a level 5 Digimon that costs 7 or 8, you can see how that can be very punished by your opponent if they have a hand that is also on curved, or they can even just hard slam their own level 4 or level 5 right back at you. And this causes a scenario where the game state is somewhat accelerated, but also neither player really has the hand resources to back it up, because in Digimon, the main source of your draw power is from Digivolution. So when you have a brick hand, or at least a hand where you have to pass over too much memory to your opponent to feel comfortable with, then they're going to be at a very huge advantage in terms of the memory game, and your hand is probably not going to allow you to catch back up without having to invest heavy resources, which your opponent is not doing because they are getting their Digivolutions off, which replenishes their hand. So where does Mulligan come into this exactly? Well, like I stated previously, the way that Mulligan works in Digimon is that you get to look at the top 10 cards of your deck essentially. So when we look at our ratios and statistically speaking how likely we are to hit a certain card, we can instead take into account the top 10 cards of our deck instead of the top 5 like we were previously. Let's take a look at these hypergeometric calculations just so you guys can see for yourselves the effect that Mulligan can have on your opening hand. So as you're going to see here, a standard 5-card opening per the current rules, you have about an 83% chance to hit a rookie if you are running a pretty standard 13 rookie ratio in your deck. However, per the Mulligan rules, you have a 97% chance to see a rookie in the first 10 cards of your deck. That means if you don't hit a rookie in your first 5, you can send it back, draw your new 5. In total, you had a 97% chance to see a rookie in those 10 cards. Absolutely insane consistency that we're going to see coming out with these new rules. But just to take it even one step further, the Mulligan rules actually allow us to get really greedy with our ratios and still maintain a pretty consistent approach to your deck. Just to take it to the extreme, I'm showing you guys here a deck that is only running 7 cards as their rookies. And as you can see, there is still an 85% chance of you to be able to see a rookie in your opening 10 cards. This is actually 2% higher than a deck running 13 rookies under the current rule set. As you can see, this is going to give decks a lot of play to add some extra cards that they weren't able to run before. So just as an example, we can maybe take, let's say, a Jessamon deck that previously had to run 12 to 13 rookies in order to be able to curve out appropriately into their Greymon and then Savior Hugmon. But now what we're going to be able to see is maybe a Jessamon deck that is only running 7 or 8 rookies, maybe just their 2 playsets of Hugmons, and then fill out those extra slots with Sistermons or even more level 4s in order to help them curve out appropriately. We even saw an example of this already taking place at the DigiFest tournament that took place, where the Lilithloot player who got 4th place ended up running a purple deck that only ran, I believe, was 8 rookies total. He took a very greedy approach to his deck, and it clearly paid off, as he was the only non-blue deck in the top 4. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of this greedy style deck building as people become more accustomed to running with mulligans as the main rule set for this game. However, we do also have to talk about the negatives of the mulligan rule being implemented. Because Digimon is a game with such a heavy draw engine built into the rules, having another added layer of consistency by adding on this new mulligan rule is going to allow the decks that were already consistent to be even more consistent in what their game plan is, which could potentially weed out other decks that may have otherwise had a shot at beating them, given that they maybe weren't able to get up off the ground, which is of course part of every card game. However, in a card game, we do want to be able to express and play our game to our fullest as often as possible. So even though we are conceding the fact that the most consistent decks are just going to be that much more consistent, we also have to take into account the fact that maybe the floor of the game has also risen as well by allowing inconsistent decks to be able to have a fair shot. Things like Jessamon, Machine German, Purple, these are all decks that have had their floor raised by this mulligan rule, and I think once that players get accustomed to the rule and how to change their deck building accordingly, we're going to be seeing a lot more variation in the metagame. Of course, blue is still going to be that top tier level threat, but I think we are going to see some adaptations come out pretty soon, and I don't think mulligan is going to be the reason why blue stays at the top. If anything, mulligan is going to be the reason why other decks are going to have an opportunity to fight against this deck. So moving into the Ultimate Cups at the end of the month and looking back on the DigiFest that happened last month, I think Bandai made the correct choice in keeping the mulligan rule around while leaving side deck out maybe for a future date. I just don't think the game is ready for it, but that's a whole different can of worms that I haven't really talked about on this channel, and I won't really get into because it's just not something worth talking about anymore. But I do think mulligan was the correct play to keep. I think it's going to reduce the amount of non-games, which is always a good thing. And it just feels good in practice in this game to be able to have that hand refresh, to see some extra cards, and reduce the amount of times where your hand is just all Tamers options and high cost to Digimon. Alright, so I hope you guys learned something from this mulligan video. If you have one takeaway, it is to consider reducing your rookie count from the standard 12 to 14 and maybe cut it down to 7, 8, or 9, and then use those extra slots for added consistency cards elsewhere in your deck. Alright, so please follow me on Twitter at DigitamerJoel. I am trying to grow that, and that's going to be where I'm posting a lot of my thoughts on the game. And also, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I am looking to grow the channel even more than it already is. We're already on our way to 1100, which is super crazy. And thank you guys for watching so much, and I'll see you in the next video. GG's.